Hey, what's up everyone? So in this video, I wanted to talk about 5 things that bother every cloud engineer, or at least bothers me a lot. So let's go. All right, so the first thing that annoys cloud engineers is when you go through your deployment, you set up everything properly. It takes you time. For example, you deploy a VM, you generate your password and all that stuff. And then you click deploy, all the checks passed, and then it just fails. And you have to start over again. Now, of course, you can always download the template and all that stuff beforehand to avoid this problem, but why doesn't it just work? Sometimes it just fails for no reason, like either there's a problem in the cloud provider or there's a problem, who knows, but it fails and you have to redo all this work all over again. And it is so annoying to have to deal with that. It's just all right, the second thing that is very annoying is when you try to do things in a portal, but you have that one tiny little thing that requires to use the CLI. Now, that's not always a problem because as a cloud engineer, technically you would have mastered the CLI and you should be able to do the job in the CLI. But why can't it work? But why can't I just do everything in the portal? Why does that one little parameter does not work in the portal? The problem is not that you have to do it in CLI, it's how much work is involved to do anything in the CLI. You have to get the resource ID, you have to get the resource group, you have to get the subscription, you have to get so many things together in order to do that one thing. Whereas in the portal, you can just click, and you get there. It's just very annoying when there's like that one thing that just doesn't work in the portal. The third thing is when you look at costs. And you look at costs and you're like, why do I have these costs? Where does all this come from? And then you find that cryptic cost or that cost that doesn't really tell you anything. And you're like, why? Where does this cost come from? It's just hidden or it's cryptic or whatever. And you also don't know what service causes what costs. For example, I have a problem at work where Azure Threat Protection scans resources and you get the cost of the scan, but at the same time, you also get the cost of the read and write operations from Azure Threat Protection. And so it's like, how much are you actually costing me? Because I know you're costing me the compute to analyze my data, but how much are you costing me in the read operations? If I put this data in an archive tier, and this is reading my archive tier, that's going to be very costly. So just having those costs completely hidden from me and or having to do complicated like data analysis to figure out what costs what and how much what contributes to what. It's a very frustrating thing in the cloud when the readings, the meter, the bill doesn't actually tell you information to help you lower your bill. So, all right, the fourth thing is how fast things change in the cloud. Now, it's fun to work in a fast changing environment, don't get me wrong, but the problem is when you can't tell where the thing went. Like for example, you work and you have your workflow, and for example, you do your thing a certain way, especially in the portal. You do things a certain way and you learn a certain way, and then you go back in there a week later and it's completely different. Things completely change from one day to the next, and you're like, where's my thing? And then it's just now hidden under a different tab, or it's named differently, or whatever. It's just everything is constantly changing. You have no control over what changes and when. And it can make life very hard, especially if you're not in the mood or you're having a bad day and you just have to find something that you know where it used to be, but now you have to look for it. And so it's like, okay. And that's the same thing with certification. You get your certification and you have to get renewed every year because everything changes constantly so fast that sometimes you by the time you're done with the certification, things are different again. So it's just an interesting environment, and yeah, very frustrating. But one thing to say, at the very least, if you work with code or command line, these things tend to not change nearly as fast, and they tend to not break nearly as fast. So 1 point for command line and code. And the fifth thing is all the responsibilities you have in the cloud. So on premise, things tend to be very like siloed, not necessarily a good thing, but things tend to be siloed. So you can be in charge of only VMs, you can be in charge of only network or only desktops. But when it comes to the cloud, you are now in charge of everything. And I mean, it's a cool thing, don't get me wrong, but now you have to learn networking, you have to learn security, you have to learn virtual machines, you have to learn software development and functions and serverless, and you have to learn code to do DevOps and deployment and things like that. So as fun as it is to work in this environment, it is frustrating to have to learn so many things. It's just there's not enough time in the day to become an expert at the cloud, whereas you can have enough time in the day to be a VMware administrator expert. You can't be a Azure expert or AWS expert, but you can be a VMware administrator expert, because that is just a very, I would say, finite tool or finite responsibility. So that's one frustrating thing about the cloud. All right, and bonus number 6. You get a bonus number 6 for sticking out to the end. Bonus number 6 is the optimization. Optimization can be extremely frustrating in the cloud because it's something you have that is almost exclusive to cloud, at least in IT, where in the on-prem environment, you have a computer that is running virtual machines. You've paid for it. It's on 24/7 because you don't have a choice. You have to have this computer on 24/7, and you might as well just put all the machines always on and all that. Now, when you go to the cloud, you can't just do that, because do you really need all these machines always on? Are you going to pay for that machine to be always on? And so you always have to fight with, how do I save the most amount of money? And it can be as simple as auto shut off, right? Sometimes you can just turn off the resource and it's fine. But how do you really only pay for what you actually use? And that's just a big problem with the cloud. Every month, personally, I go into our bill and I look at where I can save money. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of math. It's a lot of things that on-premise people don't have to do. They may have to optimize the use of the resources, but they don't have to optimize when it gets used. The virtual machines, turning off, why? Why would you turn off a virtual machine unless it's being decommissioned? You don't have to turn it off. Whereas in the cloud, it's like, do we really need this machine on 24/7? So just another layer of cloud complexity. Are there any of frustrations that I haven't covered that you think, Carolyn, this is frustrating? Why didn't you talk about that one particular piece? So let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.